Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
The night I found them, I was just trying to get home without skidding into a ditch. It was mid-December, 2013. I was 36, dead on my feet after the night shift at the distribution center outside Presque Isle, Maine. That kind of snow, sideways, thick, no real road left, makes everything look like nothing. I missed my usual turn and cut behind the old salt depot, hoping to shave 5 minutes off the drive. That's when I saw it. The busted yellow frame of a school bus half sunk in the lot, storage tags still spray-painted on the side. Just past it, the security light above flickered like it couldn't make up its mind. Then something tapped the metal. I figured raccoon. Then a hand, small, fast, slapped the fogged window. I froze, not scared, just shocked. You don't expect kids out here, not in that cold. I cracked the emergency hatch at the back and climbed in. My breath came out in clouds. The air smelled like rust and frozen plastic. Under a dirty tarp were 2 girls, maybe 11, twins. One had chattering blue lips and eyes like she was forcing herself to be brave. The other didn't speak, just shook and clutched a bent paper snowflake. The louder one looked right at me and said, "Don't tell anybody we're here." Quick note. Before we start, share in the comments how's your day going and where are you joining from. And let's continue. I crouched down, pulled off my flannel-lined jacket, and wrapped it around both of them. "You don't need to talk right now," I said. "First things heat. We'll figure the rest after." They didn't argue, didn't run. They just let me carry the quiet one out first while the other followed close. Back at my duplex by Ashford Lake, I fired up the pellet stove like my life depended on it. The warm-up cycle took forever. I set cocoa on the counter, store brand, half expired, and dug through the laundry for dry hoodies that used to belong to my daughter. "I'm Caleb," I said. "You got names?" "Maggie," the talker said. "She's Mara." "We're fine." She said it too fast. They stood in my kitchen, shoulders still tight. Maggie kept glancing at the door like someone might come bursting in. Mara looked like she'd fold in half if anyone raised their voice. I didn't ask anymore. Kids like that don't need questions first. Then, behind me, a soft sound. My daughter Nora stood in the doorway, hair hanging down the way she liked it, half her face hidden. 13, and barely said a word in over a year and a half. Selective mutism, they called it. Fancy words for a broken line of trust. She stared at the twins. Didn't speak. Didn't move. But she didn't back away either. That meant more than I could say. Maggie started humming under her breath. Steady, like a lullaby someone made up on the fly. Mara joined in with a second note, low and thin, but it held. Nora didn't hum. She didn't bolt either. She stayed planted right there. I turned toward the shelf where my mother's old flute case had been sitting untouched for years. My fingers hovered near it, unsure. For the first time in forever, I wanted to open it. She tapped twice and I tapped back. Just once. We stayed like that, not talking, just keeping time. I didn't try to fill the silence. That was the trap, assuming silence meant something needed fixing. I'd done that before and made it worse. The girls were out cold on the pullout, Maggie curled like a fox with her knees tucked in tight, Mara flat on her back with one hand still holding that paper snowflake, now more wrinkle than shape. The couch creaked when they shifted, and the fleece blanket kept sliding off until I tucked it tight under their arms like I used to with Nora. Nora tapped again, slower this time, and I picked it up on the edge of the table, then moved to the stove for another mug. She stayed planted by the doorway, bare feet on the cold tile like it didn't matter. "You know this one?" I asked, keeping my voice low as I played the first 2 notes of Scarborough Fair. She shrugged just a little, shoulders shifting, not a nod. That meant maybe. I played it soft, no flourishes, no showing off. Just straight tone like I used to in high school when we practiced late in the band room after football kids cleared out. Nora didn't join in. She just sat and listened, palms flat on the table, like she was holding the whole thing still by not moving. The next morning hit too fast, and I let them sleep. I made oatmeal again, this time on purpose, without the toast stunt. Maggie came into the kitchen like it was a normal school day, hair sticking up in all directions, rubbing her eyes. "I dreamed about bacon," she mumbled, "but I'll settle." Mara shuffled in behind her, more cautious. She scanned the corners again. That kid didn't stop reading rooms, not even when nothing changed. I passed bowls around and watched them eat like they were trying not to seem hungry, but couldn't help it. Nora didn't sit. She leaned in the doorway, hands in her sleeves, red plate in her hand. She slid it forward and set it gently in front of Mara, the only one without a chip. Nobody said anything, but I felt it, clear as a bell. That was Nora's way of saying they weren't just guests, they were allowed. I kept my tone calm. "So, who's this Aunt Denise?" Maggie chewed slow and said, "She was my mom's best friend. We were with her after Mom went away. Denise works nights, said the woods would teach us not to be soft. Has she called?" I asked. "Nope," Maggie said, stabbing a raisin like it owed her money. I nodded. "All right, you're safe here tonight." That's when my phone buzzed. Lydia, my ex. She always picked the worst times to pop up. "Why are rando kids in the house on your week?" That was the whole message. No, hey, no, is Nora okay? Just that. She loved the word rando, made people sound like clutter she didn't have to think about. I turned the phone screen down and refilled the kettle. Nora stepped into the kitchen just enough to grab a spoon. That was her second entrance. First was the plate. This one was a full foot forward. For her, it was a damn parade. I waited until the girls finished breakfast before I pulled down the flute case again. My mom's old nickel-plated Armstrong, scratched near the mouthpiece where her ring always hit. I opened it slow, like muscle memory might still be in there somewhere. I popped the latches, fitted the head joint, and rolled the embouchure hole till it sat right on my lip. The metal still tasted like old pennies and church basements, cold and familiar. "No pressure," I told Nora. "Just sound." She didn't answer, but her shoulders dropped just a little. That's how I read her back then. Never by words, just how she held herself. Whether she stood in the doorway or stepped over the line, whether her hands balled or laid flat. I played a low A with some breath on it. Maggie's eyes lit up. She found a pitch above mine, real clean, like she already had it stored in her back pocket. Mara went under her, soft but confident, like she knew exactly where to sit between. They weren't trying to impress. They were just building something, like they'd been cut apart and were trying to find the seam. Nora opened her mouth a little, just barely. A whisper came out that was almost a note. She startled herself, looked down quick, and let her hair fall like a curtain. I kept my eyes on the keys, pretended I hadn't heard it. Didn't want to scare it off. I walked to the mantel, pulled down the old cassette recorder my dad gave me when I turned 21 and still thought gigs could change lives. It had a rewind button you had to jab twice to make it stick. I set it down and hit record. "You calling somebody?" Maggie asked. "Tomorrow," I said. "But I'm calling them after breakfast and I'm saying you're warm and fed." She didn't push, just nodded once and folded her arms. When they finally went to bed, Maggie and Mara on the pullout, tangled like puppies, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of hot chocolate, the off-brand kind with gritty powder and not enough marshmallows. I thought about the way men like me get measured, by the check we send, by the job title, by how well we split weekends. Not by things that matter, like whether our kid hums for the first time in 19 months. Around 2 a.m, Nora padded in barefoot, hair loose, sweatshirt swallowing her whole frame. She walked to the kitchen doorway, breathed out one quiet note, soft and slow, and then tapped the table twice. "You want me to keep it steady?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She tapped twice again. I started tapping with her. Soft in rhythm, no melody, just time. It was the first beat of something that felt like life again. The next morning started with scrambled eggs and quiet. No laughter this time, Mara kept twisting the edge of the couch blanket in her lap, and Maggie just stared at the table like she was memorizing it. Even Nora didn't lean in the doorway. She stayed back, arms crossed, still in that old flannel hoodie. I called Aroostook County CPS right after we cleared the plates. I didn't hand the girls off. I stayed on the line, gave my name, spelled it twice, and told them exactly what I told the girls. They're safe with me. Come talk to them. The woman on the line was brisk but polite. Said someone would follow up that day. I kept the twins close and the stove fed. Aaron showed up just after lunch in a county-issue Ford with bald tires and a file folder so thick it looked ready to split. He wore a camo beanie pulled low and had the look of a man who's eaten more gas station sandwiches than home-cooked meals. He didn't come in like a cop. No clipboard held up like a shield. Just knocked once and waited with his shoulders slightly turned like he already expected the worst. I opened the door and said, "They're in the living room. Want coffee?" He nodded. "If it's hot." I poured him a cup in my last clean mug and let him sit in the worn-out recliner while the girls stayed on the pullout. Maggie gave him the kind of look kids save for people who've let them down. Mara curled in tight, but didn't hide. Aaron didn't start with threats or forms. He just asked their names, how long since they'd seen Denise, what the last few nights had looked like. Maggie didn't cry, didn't whine. She told it straight. Denise left them at a friend's. The friend got tired of feeding them. No ride, no money, no heat. The bus was open. That was the plan. Aaron scratched something into the folder and said, "I'll try to keep you together. There's a neighbor family I trust. Good folks." I stood by the door and kept my hands in my pockets. He looked at me then and said, "You're not in trouble." "You did good?" I nodded and stared at my boots. Compliments from other men land weird, like something sharp you're not sure how to hold. After he left, Nora grabbed her coat and walked to the garage, the cold one with the cracked window and the cheap rug duct-taped to the cement. She went straight to the dead upright, the one I bought off a retired preacher for $20 and 2 cases of bottled water after his granddaughter quit lessons. She pressed middle C like it might snap back. The sound was thin, but honest. She held it down and hummed a clean match that rose steady. It was so exact it made my throat clench. I looked away. Didn't want to freeze her up by looking too proud. Then my phone lit up. Lydia. Her message came in as one long block of self-importance. "I can't believe you're collecting strays on your week, Caleb. We've talked about boundaries. This is exactly the kind of instability a judge would take into account." Rita, Lydia's sister, followed up 5 minutes later with her own version. "Not your job to fix everyone else's mess." I didn't answer either of them. Just turned the phone over and went back to making sure the space heater stayed aimed at the piano bench. That night at work, the walls closed in fast. My supervisor Greeley flagged me in the loading bay with his dumb clipboard and his mouth full of authority. "I moved you to nights every other week," he said like it was some casual update. "Team players flex." I didn't argue. I already knew what it was. Word travels around towns like Presque Isle faster than frostbite. Someone saw something. Someone whispered to someone else. Now I was the guy sheltering stray kids. Not reliable. Not controllable. I went back to stacking pallets one over the other and counted the rhythm in my head. 4, 4, 5. That was the beat we'd landed on. I pictured Nora's shoulders loosen just a touch when Maggie sang. That half-inch of calm. On my break, I popped the trunk and dug through an old banker's box where I kept things I didn't know how to throw out. Receipts, loose bolts, and a pile of cassettes from my dad. One of them had a label I didn't recognize. In his handwriting, "For a kid, someday." He died in 2007. I never played that one. Didn't even remember keeping it. I held it for a second, flipped it over, then tucked it in the glove box like it was hot. Back home, the living room was dim, just the orange glow of the pellet stove and the blue light from the kitchen night bulb. Nora sat straight at the upright like she was guarding something. I didn't say a word. I just set the tape down next to the lamp and said, "When you want." She nodded. That was enough. Aaron called the next morning. "They can stay 2 nights," he said. "We're working on something nearby. I don't want to split them unless I have to." He didn't promise anything, and I respected that. Some people speak in certainty to feel in control. Aaron didn't. He spoke like a man who's seen plans fall apart before breakfast. We kept it quiet those 2 days. Oatmeal, practicing, soft hums. Maggie helped Nora reorganize the pile of sheet music I'd kept in an old shoebox from college. Mara started writing notes in pencil in the margins, just little arrows and comments like, "Start lower," or "Pause here." They acted like they'd lived there a year, not a week. By Thursday, Aaron showed back up. The Harrisons, couple 3 streets over, had agreed to take both girls. Good people. Middle-aged, no kids at home. They even had a black lab named Tater that Maggie fell for before the front door finished opening. But here's the part that stuck. CPS filed a note saying I could supervise the girls at my place after school, strictly for rehearsals, and with regular check-ins. Aaron dropped off a paper with dates and my initials at the bottom. I signed it without hesitation. That night, Nora picked a melody on the upright and paused halfway through the measure. She didn't ask for help, just looked at me, nodded once, and kept going. We weren't calling it a band yet, not even close. But the room didn't feel like it had before. It felt full. I nodded like it was nothing, but when Nora said she'd take the first note, my fingers damn near forgot what to do. I restarted the piece and let her lead, just a half step ahead of me on the keys. She kept her eyes down, but the sound was sure. Not loud, not pretty, just steady. Mara followed under her, almost like breathing. Maggie found her line fast and full, like she'd been waiting to belt it since birth. We didn't call it rehearsal. We just kept showing up in the living room. Every night after homework, after dinner, after Nora checked that the upright hadn't gone out of tune again. Grace Pennington dropped by the house one Thursday with a sack of sheet music and a real mic stand she dug out of the supply closet at Ashford Middle. She didn't ask permission. Just set it down, gave Nora a gentle smile and said, "You're all set for the dry run next week." She didn't stay for tea, just nodded once at me and left, like she knew too much kindness all at once might tip the balance. I found myself checking the stove more, replacing the filters early, buying the good cocoa instead of the cheap stuff. I wasn't prepping for a performance. I was making sure the foundation didn't crack. Maggie started drawing logos in the corner of her school notebooks, 3 lines, staggered like stairs, with a tiny bird above them. Mara found an old clipboard and started keeping notes. Tempo, key shifts, air timing. Nora wrote nothing, but every day she played with more space between her shoulders. 2 days before the school showcase, I drove them to the practice session. As we walked through the side entrance of Ashford Middle, I caught it. A dry erase drawing on the practice room door. A trophy with twin heads and big cartoon eyes. Underneath it, someone had written, "Talent twins plus the mute." I didn't flinch, just pulled a tissue from my coat and wiped it off slow and steady, like I was cleaning a mirror that wasn't mine. Maggie saw it. She didn't say a word, but her jaw set like concrete. Grace came around the corner holding Nora's piano charts. She didn't ask what happened, just held out the stack and said, "Time to sound check." Nora didn't speak, but she didn't back away either. She sat on the bench, adjusted the height, and started the warm-up scale like she'd done it in front of 1,000 people. Back home, I could tell the nerves were setting in. Nora kept double-checking the mic placement on the broomstick we used. Mara erased and rewrote the set list 3 times. Maggie ran the same opening line again and again until her voice cracked, then drank lukewarm tea without complaining. That night, Lydia showed up unannounced at the front door. I opened it just enough to block her from walking in. She had that edge in her voice I knew too well. "If this whole little act blows up on stage," she said, "I'll file to revisit custody." "I mean it, Caleb. I won't have her dragged through another failure." I didn't argue. Arguing gave her air. I just said, "It's not about you," and shut the door before she could make it more than that. Later, in the living room, Nora stood on our makeshift stage. Throw pillows as footlights, the broomstick mic on center. I rested my flute on a music stand I'd rigged from an old floor lamp. She looked out at the empty space like it mattered. Not scared, just alert. "You can start it if you want," I told her. She didn't answer, just moved her fingers over the keys, nodded once, and counted us in. 1, 2, 3, and let the first note out soft but certain. We practiced until the space heater clicked off from overuse. My breath was tired. My embouchure was shot. I cracked a note halfway through a scale and cursed under my breath. Nora tapped the wood next to the keys once. Just once. I looked at her. "I'll take the first note," she whispered again, this time louder. I didn't smile. Didn't hug her. Didn't say I was proud. I just said, "Okay." The night before the showcase, we packed our gear in tote bags from the local IGA. My flute, the printed music, Mara's clipboard. Maggie wrote a thank you on a napkin and slid it into Grace's folder without saying a word. Nora wrapped her paper snowflake from Mara in a sandwich bag and tucked it under the keys on the upright like a charm. On the morning of February 8th, it was 10 degrees and sharp wind. I dropped them at school early. I stood by the back of the auditorium and watched them carry their things without help. The janitor unlocked the backstage door, and Nora held it open for the twins. They didn't see me watching, but I didn't need them to. That wasn't the point. That night, we ran the set one last time in the living room. No corrections, no stops, just the full 3-minute set from start to finish. When we landed the final note, nobody spoke. We didn't have to. I stayed up half the night, not sleeping, just lying there on the couch, arms crossed, eyes on the ceiling like it might give me a reason to relax. I'd swabbed the flute twice already, repacked the cleaning rod, and checked the pads like I was prepping for Carnegie Hall instead of a middle school showcase with folding chairs and busted risers. Nora's bedroom light clicked off around midnight. The house finally stilled. Even the pellet stove had run itself quiet. Next afternoon, I picked them up after school. Nobody said much. Mara kept checking her wrist like there was a watch there. Maggie chewed her thumbnail down to a raw edge. Nora just kept both hands in her coat pockets, headphones in, nodding slow to a track I couldn't hear. We parked behind Ashford Middle around 5:30. The wind was sharp again, and the parking lot had patches of black ice that'd catch your ankle if you weren't looking. I carried the flute case and our music folder while the girls handled the old uprights sheet set we used for the piano cover and the mic stand, packed in 2 duct tape parts. Inside, the auditorium was exactly what I remembered. Orange curtains that looked sun-faded, old wood floors that complained when you shifted your weight too fast, folding chairs that never sat level. Some folks might have called it cheap. To me, it looked like a test. Like one of those rooms where you earn something or you don't. We were 15th on a list handwritten in pencil and taped to the side of the piano with Scotch tape that had yellowed at the corners. One teacher paced the aisles. One custodian slept in the back row with his hoodie up. When they called us, they didn't say our names. Just, next up, a trio. That's what we'd asked for. Perfect. I walked out behind them, slow and steady, holding my mother's old nickel-plated flute across my lap like it was a seatbelt. I sat in a folding chair next to the stage-right riser, close enough to see Nora's fingers. I hadn't played in front of anyone since she was 8, and even then, it was just a backyard barbecue and half a verse of Danny Boy. The lights hit hot. I could see the dust floating in the beam. Nora didn't wait. She just shut her eyes and laid one clean note down on the keys. Delicate, exact. It floated out like a bird that had spent too long fighting a window and finally found the opening. Maggie came in next. No hesitation. Her voice landed above Nora's like it had always been there. Easy, full, no apology. Mara slipped under both of them, anchoring the chord, not with volume, but with tone so steady it made your chest hum. I stayed light, counter-melody only, flute soft and sharp enough to thread between them without taking space. We didn't lead. We followed her, Nora. She held the whole thing. And then something happened that I'll never forget. The room went still. Not fake still, not polite silence. Real still. The kind where cafeteria kids stop rustling snack bags. The kind where teachers stop grading. The kind where parents forget to check their phones. The last chord didn't fall, it landed. It sat there in the space like a held breath. Then nothing. Just that rare, rare silence that only comes right after something honest. First one to stand was an older woman, grandma maybe. She clapped once, then again. Then a teacher I didn't recognize. Then 3 kids in the second row, almost checking if it was okay to react. Then it came. Full applause, not wild, not stadium loud, just real. Backstage we waited with the other acts. Nobody said much. A boy in a Letterman jacket, the kind with too many patches for February, walked up to Nora, hands in his pockets. His ears were bright red. He held out a butterscotch in the wrapper and said, "Sorry for that time." Nora looked up at him. No smile, no hard stare either. Just gave a small nod and took the candy. Didn't unwrap it. Just held it like a receipt for something she'd paid for and finally got returned. I didn't say anything either. Just let her handle it. We drove home with the radio off. Mara fell asleep sitting up in the back seat. Maggie kept her hand on the folded sheet music like she didn't trust it not to blow away. Nora leaned her head on the window, earbuds in, humming something I couldn't place. Back at the house, they went to bed without a word. No debrief, no cheers. Just climbed the stairs, one after another, as if the air hadn't changed. I sat on the couch again, flute case on the floor next to me, unopened. I didn't swab it. I didn't even touch it. I just stared at the carpet like something might grow there if I held still enough. An hour later, Nora padded downstairs, hair in her eyes, earbuds still in. She didn't say hello, just sat cross-legged on the couch, phone in hand, listening to the recording I'd made on the backup mic from Grace's setup, the one I hadn't told them I was running. She listened through the whole thing without looking at me. Then, quiet but clear, she said, "We should record it." I blinked once. "All of it?" She nodded. "Yeah, all of it." That was it. No big plan, no mission statement, just a kid who'd walked through fire saying she wasn't done singing yet. I slept on the couch again that night. Not because the bed wasn't free, but because I was scared to break whatever this thing was. Like touching it too hard might make it disappear. I kept the lights low, kept the flute wiped and resting in its case. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was just filling time. I felt like something had started. The letter came 3 days after the showcase. It was thick stock paper, the kind meant to feel official in your hand. The envelope had a real stamp, not metered. Postmarked February 10th, 2014. Return address, Office of Youth Engagement, Augusta. Inside was a full-page denial for the district-level winter event. No signature, just a typed name at the bottom, Paula Denham, Youth Engagement Director. I stood in the kitchen and read it twice while the girls reheated leftovers. Northwood 3's participation is declined due to non-enrolled members. While we support student creativity, multiple parent concerns have been raised regarding fairness and eligibility. No specific concerns listed. Just vague hand-waving meant to sound neutral. I didn't need to see the names to know where it came from. Lydia, of course. Still sore she didn't control this part of Nora. Rita, probably, trying to paint herself as the moral compass of a town that had lost its needle. And Mark Pritchard, loudest parent at every board meeting, coached his kid like a halftime show, taught him that volume beat value. I laid the letter flat on the counter and pressed the edges down with both hands. Nora walked in and caught the look on my face before I could school it. She didn't ask. She just said, "It's still our song." That night, Grace called, voice tight like she'd been sitting on the news too long. "I didn't know they'd swing like that." "I'm sorry. Not on you," I said. "They don't like what they can't control." She paused for a beat. "They're scared of what's honest." They should be. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and filed a Freedom of Information request with the school district. Name, email, reason. Took less than 10 minutes. No rage, just paper. I've learned that paper lasts longer than yelling. While it ground through the system, we did the only thing that made sense. We recorded. Nora brought out a wide-ruled spiral notebook she hadn't used since 6th grade. The front said "Room for Small Voices" in black Sharpie. Under that, a second line in her careful print. "Some thunder lives behind teeth." I read it and had to step into the hallway for a second, just to breathe. The upright was cranky. The D key stuck again, probably from dry air or just plain age. Nora pressed it once, hard, and the hammer caught on the felt. She flinched. It wasn't just an instrument to her. It was armor. "I can build a flute version," I told her. "You don't have to fight the keys." "Not for this one," she whispered. So I pulled the action, used wood glue and a Hail Mary, and wedged the hammer back into shape. Let it dry while we ate grilled cheese. Checked it with a soft strike that hit just right. We mic'd the living room with a condenser Grace lent us, ran cables under the throw rug to kill reverb, and built a blanket fort around the old folding table to dull the highs. Maggie and Mara sat cross-legged like they were back in church. Nora gave one nod. No countdown, just press the first key. She didn't flinch. We nailed the take on the third try. It wasn't perfect. That was the point. It cracked in spots, breathed in others. You could hear the floor creak once and a space heater click off at the very end. No polish. Just true. I uploaded it that night as track 1 on a free EP titled "Songs for the Waiting." Artist name, Northwood 3. I didn't tag the school. I didn't mention the district. Just one line in the description. "We know we miss your rule. Maybe we hit your heart. We didn't tell anyone about it. Just let it sit out there in the quiet. A thing built by kids who weren't invited." 2 weeks later, the FOIA came back. 5 emails. I read them twice. Paula to Mark Pritchard. "If we let this group in, we set a precedent we can't sustain." Mark replied, "Can't let a pity act define our kids." I printed both messages and stuck them on the fridge with a lobster magnet I got free at a gas station once. I didn't post them. Not yet. I wasn't after war. I was after weight. Proof. Something that stayed. Nora came in while I was staring at the printout. She didn't ask what it said, just looked at me and said, "Let's record another one." Maggie had already picked the next title, "Chords for Cold Rooms." Mara made a cover drawing with pencil smudges and little waves that looked like breath in winter. We did 4 more tracks in 5 days. 2 with flute, 1 a cappella, 1 with just upright and foot taps. They weren't polished either. We didn't edit out chair squeaks or the one moment Nora laughed mid-verse when Maggie messed up a word and said flumble instead of fumble. We left it in. Because why not? They didn't want perfect. They wanted real. I posted the full EP with no warning. Didn't share a link. Just changed the page banner to a quote from Nora's notebook. "You don't have to be loud to echo." I didn't wait for permission. I didn't ask Lydia. I didn't check with Grace. I didn't consult CPS because I wasn't breaking anything. I was letting something live. 2 days after the post, Grace texted, "Someone's listening. Keep going." That night, Nora wrote a thank you message on a sticky note and taped it to the fridge, right next to the printed email. It just said, "We're not the rule. We're the exception they'll remember." She pressed the note down flat, then turned around and hugged me without warning. Arms tight. No words. It lasted 5 seconds. Longest hug she'd given me since 3rd grade. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I was picking through a crate of bruised Honeycrisps at Hurley's Market when Mark Pritchard showed up over my shoulder like a cold draft. He didn't say hello. Just stood there like his mouth had been waiting for a microphone. "Must be easy using sob stories," he said, nodding toward my cart. I stared at the apple in my hand, turned it slow, then looked up. "You can say what you want," I told him. They still sang. He smirked, but it didn't stick. Left with a jar of peanut butter and no follow-up. That's what bullies do when their noise doesn't land. They scatter. That night I posted the FOIA emails on Facebook. Just a screenshot. Paula's "we can't set a precedent" and Mark's pity act nonsense. No hashtags, no name-calling. Just one caption under the image. When they say policy, sometimes they mean people. I'm not one for online drama. I'd rather fix a leaky faucet than post about it. But I've learned that whispering doesn't work when you're up against people who shout. By morning, it had spread further than I expected. Mostly quiet reactions, thumbs, a few comments. Then came Lydia's text. "You've embarrassed Nora. This is selfish." Rita followed right after. "Performative," she wrote. Big word, considering she's never once wiped spaghetti off her granddaughter's plate. I didn't reply. I'd already spent too many years answering people who didn't ask honest questions. 2 days later, Grace knocked on my door with a look on her face I hadn't seen since we were 17 and parked behind her uncle's bait shop, wondering if our lives would turn into anything. She was holding a brown paper package like it was fragile. "This was in the school closet," she said. I opened it right there on the couch. Inside was my old silver concert flute, the one I'd pawned 3 years earlier to cover Nora's inhaler refill after I couldn't float the copay. I'd never told anyone about that, not even Grace. The shop must have offloaded it in a school donation cycle. Initials CR were still scratched under the foot joint cap, crooked and shallow like a teenager had done it, which was true. I just stared at it and said, "No way," like an idiot. Grace didn't say anything, just sat down across from me and waited. In the side pocket of the case, folded between yellowing wax paper and a receipt from 1991, was a melody line in my mother's handwriting. Pencil, faint but clear. For a grandchild someday. She never met Nora, died before she was born. But she wrote like hope was a grocery list, short, practical, with nothing wasted. We finished that lullaby in the garage 2 nights later. Quilts thumbtacked to the walls, extension cords taped down, space heater fighting for its life in the corner. Nora played the piano line soft and steady. I tucked the melody on flute just above her, held back enough to leave room. Maggie and Mara sat cross-legged like they always did. On the last refrain, they sang the line twice instead of once, their voices tightening on the second pass like it meant more. I didn't give any instruction. They just did it, like they understood what the song needed before I did. After that, we built a real workflow. My cousin Jeff lent me a used Behringer mixing board. Grace got us clip-on lamps from a teacher's closet. I downloaded free tracking software and set a house rule. No retakes after 10 p.m., no matter how close we are. School mornings still mattered. We labeled takes with funny names like Spaghetti Night Reverb and Mic Stand Collapse number 2. It felt like building something. Not for show. For survival. Greeley tried to come for me that same week. Called me into his corner office and said I'd missed a shift. Claimed he had reports. Tried to posture like he was keeping the team strong. I didn't raise my voice. Just reached into my folder and slid across 2 things. My punch time card and the printout of the emails between his buddy Mark and the school board. While I was loading pallets and keeping my head down, his friends were lobbying to block children from singing 3 songs on a Tuesday night. Greeley didn't argue. Didn't apologize either. Just looked down like he'd found a snake in his lunch. I walked out before he got his voice back. That Saturday we were folding laundry when the phone buzzed. Local AM station, WPRX 870, posted a clip on their feed. Just a quiet line. "Here's something our neighbors made." Then it played Room for Small Voices. Not the radio edit. Not a version someone cleaned up in a booth. Just our original, creaks and all. They didn't name us. They didn't hype it. It was better that way. We sat on the floor and listened to the whole thing through the crappy phone speaker. Nora didn't blink. Mara reached over and held Maggie's hand without saying a word. After I stood up and walked into the kitchen. Didn't say why. Just needed a second. People started sending notes that week. Not dozens. Not viral. Just enough to know it landed. A school nurse in New Hampshire wrote, "I played your track for a speech-delayed kid. He hummed by lunchtime a dad from Kansas. My daughter only talks in song. Thank you for reminding me that's enough." A woman from Indiana sent one line, "I wish I had this at 15. I printed them, trimmed the edges with kitchen scissors, and taped them above the coffee maker. No frames, just there, raw and real. Something to look at while water boiled. One morning, Nora stuck a sticky note between them. "You didn't break me. You waited." "Thank you." I left it crooked above the coffee maker, yellow, handwritten, and enough, and brewed around it. We didn't chase fancier rooms. We made our own. Started with the library in Ashford. Small crowd, folding chairs, bad lighting, and one outlet that sparked when we tested the keyboard amp. Didn't matter. We set up in front of the biography shelves, next to a cart of overdue returns, and sang to a dozen folks who clapped like they'd paid for tickets. Then it was the VFW in Limestone. They cleared out the bingo boards and let us plug into a wall speaker that crackled every time someone leaned too close. Maggie figured out how to adjust levels by instinct. Mara wrote set lists on receipt paper with a chewed-up pencil nub. Nora started speaking 1 minute before each song, just enough to say what the song was and why we wrote it. That 1 minute did more for people than any of our harmonies. Every time. At a rehab center in Holton, the coffee tasted like someone had chewed it first, but the women in the recovery group sat with their backs straight and eyes forward. One woman in a denim jacket asked, "Who taught you to sing like that?" Nora didn't miss a beat. "My dad taught me to wait. I had to sit down." That one cracked something open I didn't know I was still protecting. We kept playing. School basements, borrowed classrooms, even the break room of a nonprofit food co-op where the janitor leaned against a mop and whispered, "That's real," after the last note. Then Grace forwarded us a note from a Portland nonprofit, asking if we could play a single 10-minute slot during their March 15th Art Expo. No billing, no announcement. Just walk out and do a song in the middle of the gallery floor. I asked, "We're not even on the list." "That might be good," Grace said. We borrowed a van from a guy I used to load trucks with. Rust along the bumper, alignment shot, pulled left every time you tapped the brakes. Still beat my hatchback. I packed my flute and mic stand in a fishing pole case. Nora carried the charts in a plastic crate that used to hold her Beanie Babies. We ate lukewarm pizza in the parking lot behind the venue and made a pact. Nobody's allowed to puke from nerves. Inside was all white walls and whisper voices. Nobody said our names. No signs. No lights. Just a tiny corner of the expo with a baby grand, one stool, and a mic clipped to a skinny black stand. I stood stage left with my flute and kept it soft. Nora sat down at the keys like she'd done it 1,000 times. Maggie and Mara stood shoulder to shoulder in the center, holding hands just until the first note landed. And that note, God, that note, clean, clear, and full. Maggie lifted above it, confident and warm. Mara held the ground under her like steel. Mid-verse, you could feel it. That ripple when people stop looking at their phones, when strangers shift forward in their seats without meaning to. That kind of hush you don't force. It just happens when something's real. We ended the song without flair. No bow, no announcement. Just the last line, then silence. Nobody swarmed us after. 3 people said thank you. One woman asked for a link to the EP. Another leaned in and said, "My son hasn't talked in 6 months. I'm going to try this tonight." That was it, and it was plenty. We drove home in the dark. The van's heater barely kept up with the cold, but nobody complained. Maggie curled up in the back with a bag of cough drops. Mara stared out the window like she was seeing the whole world for the first time. Nora rested her head on the armrest and whispered, "We should write one about this." When we got home, there was a voicemail from Lydia. "I hope you're not planning to monetize my kid," she said, like letting Nora sing was a scam I'd cooked up in the garage. I didn't argue, just said, "I'm letting her play and sing," and hung up. The next morning, an email came through from the Portland radio midday host asking if we could send a clean MP3 for rotation. Then another. Sylvia something from the State Arts Council saying she'd heard our track, didn't know who we were, but wanted to talk about a possible youth performance program in June. I told her we'd think about it. Nora walked in later that afternoon, pulled a spiral from her bag, and wrote a 2-line header for our page. No script, just her words. "If you're quiet like me, you're not broken." You're learning how to breathe. We pinned that text and left it there. Didn't post it with fanfare. Didn't tag anyone. We just made room. The hall in Augusta looked like it had been built by a committee with too much money and not enough taste. Long velvet curtains, brass trim, and that faint smell of new carpet mixed with rental shoes. The kind of place where everything looked expensive, but nothing felt lived in. We were listed last on the program. The voice we keep, closing piece. No explanation, no bios. Sylvia kept it sharp. She walked to the mic, smiled once and said, "This is about making room," then stepped off. That was better than any introduction we could have written. Backstage, Nora stood by the piano bench, arms folded tight. Her hands shook, but she didn't try to hide it. "Cold?" I asked. She didn't answer right away, just stared at the lid of the baby grand like it was a test she hadn't studied for. The night before, I'd finally played the cassette my dad left me. Just 60 seconds, his voice, low and calm, saying, "If you ever have a kid who goes quiet, wait with them." That was it. No music, no advice, just that line. I'd slipped the tape in my coat pocket this morning without telling anyone. It felt like a brick and a blessing at the same time. Across the room, Paula Denham stood by the catering table, badge clipped to her collar, pearls gleaming, not a hair out of place. She looked like the kind of person who hadn't changed her opinion since the Clinton administration. I walked over. Not fast, not angry, just clear. "We got your emails," I said. "You'll hear us anyway." She blinked like I'd just spoken French and nodded once without realizing it, then looked away. That was enough. In the third row, Lydia sat with Rita, both of them in their thickest coats like they were prepping for interviews, not music. They didn't wave. They just watched, eyes forward like they were bracing for chaos they could use. We didn't give them any. Nora opened with the first line of my mother's melody. One hand steady on the keys, the other resting in her lap. I stood behind her, flute raised, matching pitch. The sound was simple, just clean notes and space. Then the twins came in. Maggie with warmth, Mara with gravity. They hit their mark like they were laying bricks they planned to stand on. Midway through the bridge, Nora did something we hadn't practiced. She stood up. She stepped out from the bench, hands at her sides, and faced the crowd. "I used to think quiet meant broken," she said. "It meant waiting." Her voice didn't wobble. She didn't shout. She just said it like it was fact. Then she stepped back to the bench and played the next chord. The sound that followed didn't swell. It settled, like it found the softest part of the room and decided to stay there a while. And before the final note even had time to fade, the room rose. Not a roar, not a theater clap. Just every person in that space standing like a held breath had finally let go. Backstage, Sylvia found me near the coat rack. She placed a hand on my arm and said, "Are you open to doing this for kids who can't make it to towers like this?" "That's all we want," I told her. Then Paula came over, slower this time. She held a folder in both hands like it might bite. "We're revising the participation guidelines," she said. "We'd like to meet with you about—" I cut in before she could finish. "Make the rule fair for the next kid." "We'll be fine." She paused. Didn't argue. Just nodded once and stepped back. Rita opened her mouth like she had something sharp to throw, but Lydia caught her sleeve. "Don't," she said under her breath. They left before the photos. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt even. Later that night, back home, the house quiet and the coats hung up, Nora handed me an envelope. "Not tonight," she said. I nodded and slipped it into my inside coat pocket, next to my dad's tape. I didn't open it. Not for a while. It felt like something you don't rush. The sun hit the pine line just right that morning. Still some gray snow in the shadows, but the light made it feel like maybe winter had finally loosened its grip. The house smelled like cut wood again. Not smoke, not damp wool, just wood. The girls were out on the porch with Grace, crouched over poster board and a pile of dull markers, sketching out a flyer for the free concert at the community center. No sponsors, no prices, just donations, welcome for the shelter on Route 11. Inside, I was at the kitchen table, flute across my lap, cigarette paper in one hand to check the pads, running long tones from the piece we'd played in Augusta. I took it slow, breath even. No rush. Let the final note hang a beat longer than I meant to. Then I heard her. Once more. 2 words. Not a whisper. Not a maybe. A request. I turned toward the doorway and there she was. Nora. Hands at her sides, chin level, not asking permission. Just waiting. I froze like a rookie at his first chair test, then grinned and lifted the flute again. All right, I said, from the top. She took her spot at the upright without ceremony, fingers already curled above the keys, and I followed her in like I'd been doing for months. She sang and played like she'd been holding that phrase in her chest for 19 months, waiting for the right moment to let it out. And me, I just tried not to overplay it. Let her lead, let the sound stretch as far as it needed to. After dinner, she came back into the room, stool already pulled up to the mic, hands folded in her lap like she was giving testimony. I want to record a message, she said. I nodded and hit record. She didn't read from anything. Just looked ahead and said, Hi, I'm Nora Rourke. I used to think not talking meant not hurting. But really, if you're quiet like me, you're not broken. You're learning how to breathe. When you're ready, we'll hear you. We uploaded it that night, right under Room for Small Voices. No headline, no taglines, just a voice for someone else to find at 2 a.m. when they needed it most. By breakfast, the messages had started. A school nurse in Vermont who said she played it for a whole classroom. A dad in Oklahoma. A woman in Idaho who said, My students just sat still and cried in the best way. None of that mattered more than the 3rd note Nora hit without flinching. We called it the Echo Run. 7 stops in 9 days. Library church basement. 1 firehouse where the chief sat in the back row with tears running into his collar and didn't try to wipe them. We packed sandwiches, sang without monitors, checked the van tires ourselves. People didn't ask for autographs. They brought folded-up letters, stories, names of kids who still hadn't said anything, but maybe would soon. 2 weeks in, a man named Lou, Vietnam vet, leaned in close after a set and said, That slow part, in the middle? It sounded like letters my wife sent me in 1970. That's not a compliment. That's a truth he gripped my hand like it mattered. So it did. The next Sunday was quiet. Just us, the porch, and the last of the snow giving up. I sat down with Nora's envelope. Her writing was neat, the kind she took time with. No smudges, no arrows, just this. Dad. I don't remember the first time you played for me, but I remember the first time you stopped. You didn't fail me. You waited. When I sang again, you didn't rush. You listened. That saved me. My voice exists because yours did. That's the one I'll keep. I didn't say a word. She came out onto the porch and leaned her head on my shoulder. That was enough. We played that night. Just us, Grace, the twins. No mics, no recordings, no plans. Just music. The last line of my mother's melody landed right where it belonged. Even in quiet, I'm with you. People ask me now what the win was. It wasn't the stage in Augusta. It wasn't the radio. It wasn't even the policy change Paula posted in June. The win was a phrase. Once more. Said by a kid who used to flinch at sound and now walks into rooms and heals them. If there's revenge in this, it's quiet. The ones who wrote us off? They had to watch us build a room they never opened the door to. The rest is work. Packing cords, loading the van, tuning before sound check, showing up where the hurting are. I'm not a hero. I'm a dad who kept the stove fed, the flute clean, and learned when to step to the side. And when the night settles, and it's all quiet again, you can still hear it. The sound of a kid saying once more, and the bigger sound of a man who finally knew what to do. When did waiting, not pushing, help someone you love speak? Tell me in comments. If this resonated, like and subscribe. Your one click helps us a lot. Comment, good story too.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.